Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I was just tuning into the presentation by Julian, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, I don't have any cool metaverse wear today, but I am going to talk to you about an exciting topic, which is the state of crime in the metaverse. So a bit about me first. My name is Tara Annison. I'm the head of product over at TwinStake, which is a staking company for institutions. I also work with the likes of Interpol as their metacrime expert, as well as writing the Future of Financial Crime in the Metaverse report, which I would recommend you read. It's got a lot of content that I'll be covering today. And then on the side of that, I am the author of the Bitcoin ABC book, creator of the Game Against Cryptocurrency, and the world's first crypto advent calendar. Now, what we have to talk about today is a pretty packed agenda. We're going to look at what the current state of crime is across the metaverse. We're then going to look at some future crimes that might be occurring in the metaverse, and then we'll finish up by talking about some protections. So it's not all doom and gloom, but I do want to give you all an oversight of what's happening in the world of metaverse crime. So we're going to start with what is the state of crime at the moment. Now, the important thing, first of all, is that essentially any crime that happens in the real world will be possible in the metaverse, and there's going to be crimes that exist only in the metaverse because of what the metaverse is and how it works. Now, I'm kind of taking quite a big skip over and not defining the metaverse, as I think many people will have done that today and yesterday. But for me, when I talk about the metaverse, what I'm really talking about is the hyper-digitalization of the world around us. So not just virtual worlds, many that we saw in Julian's presentation, thinking about the likes of Sonium or Decentraland or the Sandbox, but this broader technologies that make up the metaverse. So when we think about some of these crimes, and this really is just a snippet of potential crimes, I'm going to dig into a couple of them today. These crimes range from everything like your financial crimes, think fraud, money laundering, tax evasion scams, to non-financial crimes, whether that is harassment, causing disruption, running illegal businesses. And we're going to take a look at a couple of examples today. So we're going to start off with financial metacrimes, and specifically we're going to look at money laundering and wash trading and how these appear in the metaverse. Now, first of all, for some risk factors when we think about money laundering, which is essentially taking dirty money, cleaning it and getting it into the broader financial or broader ecosystem generally. So when we think about why the metaverse might be a key target point for criminals to launder money, we can see that there's pretty notable 24-hour volumes, so around $220 million worth of metaverse assets for just the top 5 have been moving in the last 24 hours. That's a pretty significant volume to try and hide dirty money in. When we think about metaverse assets, they're also, for the large part, very interoperable. So whether that's the native assets, I think Mana, Sand in some of these virtual worlds, or even kind of crypto at large, it's really easy to interchange them on a decentralized exchange that doesn't require any KYC, or even on centralized exchanges. There's many that exist in jurisdictions that don't have the most robust know your customer due diligence collection processes. So it's pretty easy to move from one asset and to the other. We see very high volumes of activity generally. We've also got pseudonymous avatars in the metaverse, and we saw Julian talking about those from a dress-X perspective and a fashion perspective. But when you're kind of walking around the metaverse and virtual worlds, the pseudonymity of your avatar gives you a bit of cover that can be useful when trying to do essentially dodgy activity within the metaverse. When we look at wash trading, which is this idea of essentially trading with yourself, creating fake transaction volume, often to boost up the value of an NFT or a token, we can see that there's actually pretty significant wash trading volume happening for metaverse assets. Now, when we look at the top 10 metaverse projects and their 30-day wash trading activity, it's nearly $75 million worth of wash trading activity in the last month alone. So that's actors trading with themselves, trying to pretend that it's someone else to raise the price of their asset. That accounts for roughly 24,000 transactions, so a really huge number. And when we compare this to the percentage of wash trading volume on Ethereum at large, so in Ethereum you see nearly about 42% of wash trading activity. However, when we look at those metaverse assets that I've just mentioned, around about 48% is happening. So we're seeing a disproportionately, even just 7%, but a disproportionately higher amount of wash trading activity in metaverse assets than in Ethereum assets just generally. Now, when we think of where this wash trading is happening, pretty astounding 86% of it is happening in assets related to the Bored Ape ecosystem. So there's an awful lot of wash trading happening, whether it's with Ape, the coin that kind of reflects the Bored Ape ecosystem, or the Bored Ape NFTs and their wider collection with Kennel Club or Mutant Apes. So there's a lot of activity that we're seeing of people trying to increase the price, doing wash trading for metaverse related assets. Now, why is this an issue? Well, it means that if you're trading these assets, you're potentially not getting a fair price, because what looks like legitimate market activity potentially isn't. It's someone wash trading and boosting up the price. Means if you're making decisions about projects to move into or to integrate with, then potentially you could be led off course by the wash trading activity, making it look like the project is a bit more popular, for instance, than it is. Now, when we consider the broader ecosystem here, and I've touched on that 42% percentage of wash trading activity we see in Ethereum generally, when we look into DEXs, decentralized exchanges, one particular exchange is known to have a lot of wash trading, and that's LooksRare. And what we've seen from stats more broadly across the ecosystem is over 94% of volume has been attributed to wash trading. So the DEXs see a lot of wash trading. And actually, just this month, Solidus Labs put out some research which said that they've seen $2 billion worth of wash trading happening across DEXs more broadly since 2020. So we see a lot of wash trading happening in crypto, and that is reflected in metaverse assets as well, to a slightly higher proportion than the general system. But I want to spend a bit more time on scams, because this is something that reflects and impacts the everyday user much more. And we see headlines about scams all the time. Now, the metaverse at large is not going to be immune from scams. And actually what we see is a lot of the same scams happening in the metaverse as we see in DEXs or just the crypto ecosystem more broadly. But there's also some very specific metaverse scams, and I'll talk about a few of them today. Now, in 2022, over $4 billion of crypto was stolen via scams. So this is a very big problem. Scamming in the ecosystem makes criminals a lot of money. And sadly, I think pretty much everyone here on this call, but more broadly, would know someone that's been scammed out of their crypto assets. Now, it's pretty hard to tell just how much has been stolen from metaverse projects and metaverse assets specifically, because as I said at the top of the call, a lot of the kind of metaverse umbrella falls within just crypto more broadly. So whether that is crypto with NFTs, whether it's thinking about DeFi, DAOs, etc. So having no set category or definition for the metaverse means that we can't really get a precise number on metaverse scams, but we can certainly look into a couple of scams that have affected metaverse projects. So ApeCoin, I touched on them before, being part of the Bored Ape ecosystem. Someone created a fake airdrop, so said, click this link and you'll be able to get some ApeCoin for free. And when you click that link, what it did is it drains users' wallets to the tune of about $990,000. So pretty impactful. The sandbox virtual world has been plagued with phishing links being sent out. I know my inbox is always full of an email talking about a brand new promotion that's being run on the sandbox or a drop that's coming, and it's completely fake. It's just someone trying to get you to click a link, and then if you click it, you'll see all of your assets disappear. Pixelmon was an NFT project which raised $68 million, so a pretty huge amount. They released after some time their artwork, and it was diabolical. It looked like a child had done it. And so many people suspected this was a rug pull by the founders who'd put very little effort in and were going to disappear with the funds. What's nice actually is the community kind of rallied together. It's come back now, been acquired by a major project, and potentially is going to be reborn. But rug pulls are something that we see across the metaverse ecosystem, a project that promises you the world, delivers nothing, and runs away with your money. There's also been other NFT linked projects. So Big Daddy Ape Club NFTs, they claimed they were going to have all sorts of wearables, lands, a metaverse. That was just a scam. It saw $1.2 million taken from over 9,000 investors. So we've seen really big value scams happening across the metaverse space, whether it's with a giveaway scam promising you for something for free, whether it's 3D social engineering, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But I'm going to dig into two specific metaverse scams this year and give a bit of a personal anecdote on one of them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a pretty scary metaverse related scam that happened earlier this year, which is that the Webaverse team basically met what they thought was an investor out in Rome. Actually, what ended up happening was $4 million was stolen from them. Now, I actually have a friend from the crypto space, and I was climbing actually out in Chamonix, and at the bottom of a mountain, I get a message from my friend saying, hey, I'm out in Rome. I've just met these investors, super excited. They're going to invest in my digital clothing brand. They just need me to prove that I've got some funds before they invest a bunch of money. So she was like, I just want to, touch base with you. I know you're all into metaverse and crypto crime. So I just want to check this makes sense. And already alarm bells were ringing for me because it sounded so similar to the Webaverse scam. Now, cut forward, a lot of messages and a phone calls interchanged between us, and it seems like it was exactly the same scam. It's a pretty interesting scam, quite tech savvy, but the idea is that these investors promise you the world. They ask you to do this transfer of funds, and then they essentially are stealing the funds from you. So one to beware of, we are seeing across the broader ecosystem, but certainly from a metaverse perspective, criminals looking to pose as investors. So be aware if you are fundraising for a project. Another metaverse related scam that happened this year was the Azuki fake land drop. So Azuki had been teasing a metaverse for quite a while. What happened was that their account on Twitter, which is a gold tick account, so has a lot of reputation from that little gold tick, that was taken over, and the criminals posted a message saying, we've launched our metaverse, claim your land here, with a link of azuki.ws. Seemed pretty legit, and certainly a lot of people thought so. They clicked on that link, and the result of that was that a lot of assets were stolen. So there was around about $751,000 worth of assets stolen. Now, the vast majority of that was in USDC, a stable coin. There was also a little bit of WETH, wrapped ETH stolen, some STAR as well. And there was 18 NFTs stolen. So a really big impact for people that thought they were getting in early on this metaverse drop, but really it was a malicious action. Now, when we kind of follow the money with this and see where certainly the NFTs initially had gone, so 14 of the NFTs moved really quickly onwards. And we see this generally in crypto crime. It's really fast paced. So most of these NFTs moved on really quickly. They moved to marketplaces like X2Y2, which talks about basically liquefy your illiquidity. Certainly that's what the criminals were doing. They were trying to liquidate these NFTs as quickly as possible and get some cold hard cash eventually. They moved 12 of those through these marketplaces. They only made about $5,000, which isn't, amazing profit, but it's not bad returns, let's be honest. When you look at, say, the Beans NFT, for instance, that moved to SudoSwap. It remained there for quite a while. But what the bad actor was doing was trying to exchange these NFTs before they're kind of broadly black-marked in the ecosystem into crypto. Traditionally, they want to move them into probably not stable coins because many of the stable coins can be blacklisted. So they want to get it into ETH, for instance, be able to maybe move it across chain and start hiding the activity. So that was sadly a good example of how we saw assets disappear. When thinking about the USDC, the STAR, etc., that was all moved to decentralized exchanges for the user to cash out. So two pretty, big impact crimes there where we saw many users impacted. So why are we seeing crimes in the metaverse and for metaverse assets and metaverse projects? Well, there's a couple of risk factors here. Some of it is metaverse audience naivete. And I don't mean that as an insult. We've just got a lot of people that are really excited to join the kind of metaverse hype. They're coming into the crypto ecosystem at large, brand new. They don't know the red flags. They don't know the telltale signs of a crypto scam. They're excited by the potential, and they often don't realize something that sounds too good to be true, and it is, because it's a scam. So we certainly do need to do a lot more when we think about education to try and protect those people. But I'll talk about the protections a little bit more later. There's also some established and very well practiced typologies that scammers use, and they've practiced these across the decentralized exchange market kind of place and world, across NFTs. So what they do is just copy and paste those. If it worked well in NFTs, they'd recycle it, put a metaverse kind of flavor on it, and then scam people again. Sadly, we've seen that happen, the likes of Balloonsville. So they did a £590,000 scam, and then they launched the literal same team, just did a copy and repeat of Doodle Dragons, and then they managed to scam 30,000 people off people. And then they did a really nasty kind of goading post on Twitter, basically saying, I can't believe you guys fell for that again. So we see scammers just recycle what they're doing. And then another risk factor is kind of social media generally, which is kind of hyping up this get rich quick mindset, this like hustle hard millennial Gen Z culture with this idea that, you know, crypto is going to guarantee your riches. And sadly, that means a lot of people come into the space thinking you can't lose when you can. Sadly, many people have lost a lot of money on crypto, and certainly from scams. Now, I want to kind of finish up in the current crimes, just looking at sanctions and terrorism funding, which is two of the most kind of serious crimes you can think of. Now, one big risk that you have thinking about the metaverse and virtual worlds at large is this idea of covert meeting spaces. So this is still of me in Decentraland. It's pretty old school alpha. I've got a much cooler one now, but this is the digital space within Decentraland, and you can only get in if you have a certain NFT. Now, what this means is that if you're inside there, you could have a conversation using the chat, which is both all like spoken as well as written in Decentraland, and no one else can hear what you're saying or see what you're saying unless they're in that building with you. Now, in Digital's case, it's basically just got a book that you can sign to say Free Ross Albright and a couple of NFTs, but it's quite possible that sanctioned actors could create spaces within virtual worlds, token gate them so that they can plan attacks, also have all sorts of nefarious conversations. And what we know is Ryuk, who are linked to ransomware, they did have a digital pass. Now, we don't know whether they used it, whether they ever went inside, what they did in there, but it does indicate that sanctioned actors or sanctions-related actors are thinking and potentially knowledgeable about token-gated access. Another potential link in with sanctioned actors was from Flamingo Casino Club. So this was actually shut down by 5 states in the US. They purported to be this like metaverse casino. They were going to have all sorts of like exciting competitions where you could win Teslas and phones and all sorts. And actually, it was discovered it was run by a bunch of Russian scammers, certainly links from a sanctions perspective there, given the ongoing war in Ukraine. They were claiming that you could like buy land from Snoop Dogg and everything in there, but really it was seen as a potential money laundering vector linked to Russia. So there are all sorts of potential use cases that sanctioned actors are thinking about or could think about when it comes to the metaverse and virtual worlds. But it's not just financial crimes. Some of the most talked about more broadly actually are the non-financial crimes, and I'll touch on a couple of them today. So already there's all sorts of reported evidences of sexual harassment in the metaverse and virtual worlds, whether that's Criver, Roblox, Altspace, Horizon Worlds, Population One, Rec Room, VR Chat, you name it. There's women predominantly reporting that they've been sexually harassed, groped, stalked, even virtually gang raped. It's pretty horrific to read some of the reports. But what really stands out in the reports is actually many people say it feels as real to them as if it happened in the real world. And when you think of emerging technologies like haptic suits, which allow you to kind of feel, there's all sorts of fantastic things like you could feel a hug from a loved one, but potentially think of the impact of malevolent behavior there if you can feel that behavior. So certainly a lot of risks there when we're considering kind of the virtual sexual assault and harassment. There's also in virtual worlds things like hate speech that people have heard, homophobic and racist language. Anything you'd hear on a forum, sadly, could be within the virtual world. Now, moderating it obviously remains a challenge when you think of decentralized virtual worlds, but there have been steps taken by some of the more centralized virtual worlds to create safer spaces. Now, when we also look at things like digital radicalization, I'm going to touch on that in a bit. There's also things like cyber grooming, elder abuse, where we think of the slightly older generation who might not be as confident using the technology, as knowledgeable. And what's really kind of key to understand here is it's that full scope. So you've got elder abuse right down to under 18 abuse, with child sexual abuse material, for instance, potentially coming onto these type of platforms. So the full scale of kind of young to old in terms of risk. And when we consider that young risk, so users, including minors, so under 18s, are reported to be exposed to abusive behavior every 7 minutes in VR chat. Now, before we kind of demonize and think of these virtual worlds as somehow the riskiest places, there's probably comparable or even less frequent than social media at large. Snapchat is a huge vector for crimes against children, for instance. So we're not saying here that the metaverse is the worst of the worst, but it is really clear that crimes that are happening more broader online and social media are already carrying across into the metaverse. There's also risks, for instance, with like AI information. So there's already been reports where AI is being used to create social bots that are spreading misinformation. So this is kind of taking the broader definition of the metaverse. This could be used to spread hate, disrupt society, and it could be done by AI without us even knowing if it's true. So it's really risky when we're considering the spread of misinformation proliferated by AI within the broader metaverse. There's one element I'll touch on before we talk about future crimes, which is happening in the romance scam category. So this is where someone basically makes you fall in love with them and then they steal all your crypto. And what's really sad is that the global anti-scam organizations, they collect all these kind of reports here. They've seen losses of nearly 300 million across 1,652 victims worldwide. But the average here is what really hurts. The average per victim is $173,000 worth. Now, the crime behind the crime that I want to touch on is that money has been stolen from people by those pretending to fall in love with them. But actually, those people themselves are often the result of human trafficking. They're held against their will in scam centers. At the moment, it's traditionally in kind of Southeast Asia. They're held in these massive compounds and they're forced to scam, whether that's romance scams, other scams, but it typically tends to be romance scams. These scammers are bought and sold. There's even WhatsApp groups. I've included a few stills here where they're sold if they aren't performing, if they're troublemakers. And these people are held, as I said, against their will, often with violence against them. It could be sexual violence. Their families are put at risk and they're forced to work in conditions where they're scamming lots and lots of people at once. You can see here, you know, how many people they can be talking to, and there's literal playbooks guiding them kind of step by step in how to scam people. And this, of course, will eventually look to move from probably just crypto scams more broadly into metaverse specific scams. So one to look out for. Then when we think about future crimes in the metaverse, I'm going to run through these at a fairly fast clip, but just to scare everyone a little bit more about potential crimes. When we think of hardware attacks and privacy violations, that's everything from VR headsets that could explode if you die in game. And yes, someone actually did build that. Luckily, it's not a product you can buy off the shelves, but if someone's created it, it is something we should worry about. But when we think about smart devices that are going to be using cameras, whether that's to project messages on your hands or use AI to collect information from the world around, that's a lot of information that someone's collecting, the processing of businesses, and that you could be walking past in your everyday life. So there's a lot we need to think about when we think about securing our hardware and securing our privacy. As more companies look to have virtual headquarters, we'll probably see more denial of service attacks happening to those headquarters or to those businesses within the metaverse. Think protests in the metaverse. We'll likely see wallet tainting, and this very much builds on Julian's point about your kind of avatar in the virtual world and having a persona there. What you could see is someone sending to your crypto address a potentially illicit NFT. Maybe it's a racist NFT, maybe it's some clothing which has some really horrible imagery on, and they send that to your account. So it looks like you have maybe bought it, all with the idea of tainting your online reputation. We could look to see more augmented reality attacks. I personally don't scan QR codes at conferences because there's a risk that bad actors could have malicious code in there that clears your wallet or does something nefarious. But as we become more aware and more comfortable scanning the world around us, there is a potential attack vector that criminals could seek to exploit. Deepfake social engineering I touched on before. So this is the idea that avatars, for instance, will be walking around a virtual world dressed up as if they work for, say, Coinbase, saying, "How can I help you today?" No, that isn't actually a Coinbase person. That's someone pretending to be them. We could see videos created which make, for instance, a deepfake that looks like your boss. They come on a Zoom call. They ask you to do something. It's not your boss, that's a fake person. So everything that we currently see with the classic email-based scams today will likely move towards more video as AI video becomes much easier to create and much more realistic. One that I wrote about recently, so do take a look on my LinkedIn for this, is the idea of chatbot radicalization. So people creating chatbots that maybe purport to help with mental health or kind of social inclusion, but actually what they've programmed the chatbot to do is very surreptitiously and kind of carefully actually radicalize you. And we could see that used by terrorist organizations on all sides of the spectrum, whether it kind of religious, social, whatever it may be. So one to be aware of as we get more used to talking to chatbots. Police impersonation scams, so that very much builds on the deepfake idea I mentioned before about someone pretending to work for an agency, but we could see this with people pretending to be police officers in virtual worlds. So how can I help you? And really they're trying to scam you. It could be someone, as we see in recovery scams in the crypto space, when an exchange gets hacked, for instance, there will be an uptick of fake accounts going around pretending that they work for that exchange. They're going to help you get the money back. Actually, they're just going to scam you twice. So that could be something we see as officers, they're walking around and being more present in virtual worlds. Counterfeit items is a big one, certainly after the DressX presentation, where we saw more luxury fashion houses and fashion houses at large are coming into the metaverse, creating virtual items. We need to be able to be sure about the provenance that those items really are coming from those organizations. And certainly with the recent Roblox report saying that nearly 3 in 4 of us will spend money on digital fashion, then we need to be more careful that that fashion is legitimate. Now, I'll close off in the last minute with a little bit of the protections against metaverse crime. You've seen that there is sadly a lot of crime happening and potentially going to happen. So what can we do about it? Well, the first one, blockchain analytics, goes a long way to be able to track criminal activity. And so it's really key if you're a metaverse project that you're using blockchain analytics to help defend against bad actors. Education is absolutely key to make sure that people understand those red flags and the risks, whether that's consumers and or projects in the space. We also need to make sure that we're policing, and this really isn't an easy one, but thinking about how we have in metaverse protections, whether that's kind of bobbies on the beat, virtual police stations in those virtual worlds, more consumer guidance, the equivalent of a blue tick, so you know something is legitimate. But I'll end on, because I think it's probably about time up, but I'll end on a survey in Decentraland in 2018, where they said, how should we police our virtual world? And 41% of people came back saying we should have superheroes. 41% of people came back saying we should have an official police force, and 10% of people said basically AI and bots will save us. So we really do need to think about how we police it and think about safety across the metaverse at large, whether that's superheroes, extending our existing police forces, or technology at large. But there is a lot of crime happening. There will be even more crime. And so we need to make sure that we're thinking about how to protect users from it. So with that, I think I'm at time. So big thank you to everyone. I don't know if we have time for questions, but if not, you can catch me on LinkedIn, Tara Annison, or on Twitter. I've put my handle there. And if you want to go and buy any of my games or books, then you can head to wagmegifts.com. I can see we do have a question, so maybe I'll answer it, and if I need to jump off stage because I'm over time, just let me know in the background chat. But a question: in France, the regulator states influencer training program for crypto influencers. Do you think this could help the community to be less naive and solve the problem? Potentially, yes. I think it is important that we understand when someone is influencing us and when they're doing paid influencing, for instance. But I think actually we need a broader education offering about what it means to invest in crypto, what the risks are, what the projects are, what the good projects are. And so I think it's both on the people promoting them and having certainly repercussions if they're promoting things without thinking, in the same way if they promoted something on Instagram, which was a drink and it ended up containing some harmful chemical, they'd be in trouble. We also need the same thing if someone's promoting crypto metaverse projects at large. And then that needs to, I think, be coupled with education in schools about online safety generally, but certainly thinking about crypto. I don't know if there's any other questions or if I'm at time, but if not, thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully that hasn't scared you too much. There's a lot of benefits in the metaverse as well as risks. Thank you.